Okay, I want to talk for a few minutes here about Fritz Lang's Metropolis, this film that we are watching in conjunction with our reading of Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward and H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. This is a product of the late 19th century, early 20th century kind of mindset, reactions to industrialization. And even though it's a bit later, I should say, than these other works, which were written in the 1880s and 1890s, it fits with the themes of this particular unit of the course, which is why we're examining it now. It's also indicative of the growth of film as a medium of entertainment, and so that I think is an important thing, an important element that we want to introduce at this point in the course, and we'll watch a couple of other films as we go on here into the later weeks. Let's talk for just a minute about the historical context behind this. And this is similar to what we saw with H.G. Wells and what we saw with Edward Bellamy. The Industrial Revolution obviously had well run its course by this point, and Western civilization, and in fact at this point much of the rest of the world was industrialized or industrializing, right? And people's lives were determined in large part by their work shifts, by, this kind of round-the-clock exercise in producing as many goods as they could possibly produce. Well, this is taken to an extreme in Metropolis. This becomes kind of an all-encompassing aspect of life for just about everyone, and in ways that are, if we just think about it, particularly unhealthy, both individually and kind of at a societal level. This film was also made after the First World War, and while we don't see any direct effects or direct commentary on warfare, that needs to be on our minds as we consider the historical context here, right? The First World War proved to everyone with incredible clarity and tragedy that the application of industrialization to warfare would have tragic consequences. That industrialization, could be just horrifically destructive. And we do see some of that here, right? There's the scene, for instance, about 16 minutes into the film or so, where the protagonist, Frater, who is the son of kind of the master of the city, Johannes Fraterson, he goes into the depths, into the workers' city, or rather into the factories, and he sees this machine which is just consuming people, and then the machine itself explodes because workers aren't able to maintain it properly because they're so exhausted, and then he sees this vision of the, where it becomes this Babylonian god, Moloch. This is a figure from the Bible, actually. The machine itself seems to be swallowing these people up like it's a means of human sacrifice, or rather it demands human sacrifice, right? That, I think, would have resonated with people in the 1920s as they considered what industrialization had done in the First World War. This is also made in an era of a lot of political reform. The Gilded Age was replaced by, or rather it's, there followed upon the Gilded Age this period. In American history, this is known as the Progressive Era. It's a period of a lot of change, a lot of attempts to undo what was seen as the corruption, the dark underbelly of the Gilded Age, where the elites kind of did what they wanted. This film displays an elite who can do whatever they want, who are masters of everyone, who enjoy all of the benefits of industrialization and the wealth that comes from that, and they don't, because the workers themselves are squirreled away in underground. They don't even have to worry about the unpleasant realities that go into this, right? And so in a way, this is, trying to capture the mindset of reform to say, if we just let this thing run its course, this is what's going to happen. The elites are going to live in luxury. Everybody else is going to live in this hellish environment, even underground like rats, right? And then, as I mentioned earlier briefly, this film is a landmark piece. It is a silent film. There is no spoken dialogue in here. Everything we get are, these placards that show up occasionally where you get just a little bit of dialogue. You can appreciate, I think, film as a silent film and the power that it had to convey messages. If you look especially at the facial expressions of the characters, there's a lot of body language in all of this, right? If you've never seen a silent film, this will be, I think, a very different experience for you to watch this. But there is a kind of power to it, right? It was right around this time, 1927-28, that the first talkies, as they're called, the first films with spoken dialogue, started to appear. And so this film is kind of on the cusp of all of that. And we might say that this is, in a way, the pinnacle of what silent film was able to do. This is one of the most influential films ever made. This is arguably the first science fiction film ever made, although there are some others that, had themes that we would call science fiction, I suppose. But Metropolis would go on to influence everything from Star Wars to E.T. to, Blade Runner to all of these other kind of landmark science fiction pieces. It's just tremendously influential. Hailed as one of the greatest films ever made, or at least one of the most influential films ever made. What are some of the issues brought up here? Well, these are similar, as I said, to what we've seen in these works of literature that we've read for this unit of the course. The social consequences of industrialization. That one is key, right? What happens when the vast majority of people spend their lives their lives revolve around the factory, their work shifts, and they don't get paid very much, and they work in these hellish conditions, and the elites who own the factories and kind of run the show just experience the spoils of all of that, right? What are the social consequences? What's going to happen if we don't change things? That's really the message. The labor question, in Metropolis, it seems the workers themselves are not able to organize. One of the things that becomes apparent early on is that the figure Maria, who is a key figure, of course, in this film, is trying to get the workers together, and she's a kind of Christ-like figure, actually. There's a lot of religious imagery in this film. She's trying to lead them to a better world, and she is criticizing in her own way by sort of preaching these biblical sermons, criticizing the system that keeps them down, right? And so the question of organized labor, can the workers themselves organize to try to achieve some kind of better existence, right? That's at the heart of all of this. Progress at what cost? I mean, who benefits? It seems that only the elites have benefited from this, and most people are living like rats in the ground, right? So I think Long is trying to draw attention to that. These visions of the future. It's interesting to see what people thought the future would look like 100 years ago. The artistic renderings of this is very sort of avant-garde, futuristic visions of and most of this is shown just in these still shots, kind of artistic renderings of what they thought the future would look like. We'll look at a couple of still shots in a minute here. Biblical imagery is big in this film. Not only do we have the Babylonian god Moloch, the vision of Moloch as the machine turns into this god that demands human sacrifice, but we also have Maria's preaching about the Tower of Babel. We have the imagery from the book of Revelation, kind of the apocalyptic imagery. We have this whole dance of the 7 deadly sins that occurs right at the kind of intermission. So there's a lot of this biblical imagery that goes into this. This definitely would have resonated with people in the 1920s, right? The Bible and Christianity and all of that was at the heart of Western civilization. That would not have needed explanation for anyone. They would have known immediately who Moloch was or what that reference was to. They would have, known about the imagery of the 7 deadly sins and of the book of Revelation and all of that. And, in keeping with that biblical imagery, there is a redemption arc to this film. The figure Maria is heavily involved in this, but, she inspires Frater to bring together the workers and the elites, right? There's this scene at the end, of course, where Frater stands between his father and Grote, who is kind of the representative of the workers, and ultimately gets them to shake hands with one another, right? And Maria is the one who kind of made that happen. Let's look at some specific imagery from the film here, okay? At about the 4-minute mark, one of the most powerful images in the film, in thinking about Dystopia at least, is this image of the shift clock and then the shift change, right? I've got still images here. Notice that the shift clock runs 10 hours. Now, if you look up here, there is a 24-hour clock, and you can see that the shift change is happening at 4 a.m., right? And the workers, it seems, will just, they work 10-hour shifts, then they're off for 10 hours, then they work another 10-hour shift, right? And so there's no acknowledgement of the regular 24-hour cycle of life, of the circadian rhythms, of, kind of regular sleep schedules. These workers who are getting off at 4 a.m. will have to be at work again, it seems, at 2 p.m., and work until midnight. I mean, what would that do to the human body? This is a subtle message, but we can see the consequences. If you look at what the workers, their faces, their stride as they march into these elevators, you can see that this just beats them down. It's killing them. At 7 minutes, you have the contrast, you get the workers here, and then the contrast with the elites. This is the Club of the Suns. We've talked about how, elites were often members of these clubs where they would get together and pursue hobbies and have discussions and things like that. This is, you see this at the beginning of The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. You see this to some extent in Looking Backward. Here these sons, these beneficiaries of the elites, are, they're running, they're wrestling, they're enjoying entertainment. They have effectively high-class prostitutes who are entertaining them. So they are at a far remove from the hellish life of the workers. Okay. The 24-minute, you get this view, this futuristic view, right? This is apparently what they thought apartment buildings would look like. I don't know if this is supposed to be at a diagonal or this is just kind of a perspective shift or something, but these artistic renderings of what a future city might entail, right? And then I think a key aspect of Dystopia is the creation of this robot. The key antagonist in the film is the inventor Rotvong, and he creates this robot, right? And then he, of course, turns the robot into a likeness of Maria to lead people astray. This, corrupts the elites. It also leads the workers eventually to destroy the heart machine, which causes their city to flood and nearly kills their children. And so, what can be done with technology in sinister hands, like the hands of Rotvong. And Rotvong is manipulating Johannes Fraterson because he holds a grudge against him. It seems that they were rivals for the hand of a woman named Hel, or Helen, or something like that. And he is using the robot to try to destroy the city that he runs. And he really succeeds in doing that, right? Only thwarted by Frater, who fights him at the end and overcomes him. Okay, so hopefully that gives us some sense of, kind of the key dystopian imagery and the issues that are at stake here. You should watch this film, enjoy it, and try to notice the major themes of the course in it. Thanks.